The sky was an angry gray thick with the promise of rain, and the wind carried a biting chill that whipped through the rolling fields of Whitmore Estate. Lady Eleanor Whitmore rode her chestnut mare with a restless determination, the hood of her dark cloak shielding her from the first scattered drops, though she welcomed the storm's intrusion. It was not merely the weather she sought to escape, but the suffocating weight of expectation that pressed upon her from the moment she had been deemed marriageable. At 22 she had been courted by no fewer than 3 gentlemen of respectable fortune, yet each proposal felt less like opportunity and more like chains forged by her family's precarious finances. Her father, a man of gentle pride but diminishing resources, had long insisted that a union with an advantageous suitor was necessary to maintain the family's position in the county. Eleanor understood duty, of course, yet she recoiled from the notion that her heart must bend to a ledger rather than her own desires. The countryside blurred past her in waves of green and brown, the uneven soil slicked beneath her horse's hooves. The wind tugged at her cloak, and a flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating the sprawling estate and the distant church spire where society's watchful eyes often lingered. Eleanor's thoughts swirled with apprehension, the whispers she had overheard in the drawing-room, the barely concealed smirks of visiting matrons, the subtle yet sharp comments regarding her father's debts. To remain at home was to endure humiliation at every turn, to leave was to risk scandal. And so she rode, daring herself to feel the exhilaration of flight, her pulse quickened by the storm and the audacity of her decision. As she approached a particularly treacherous stretch of field, where the rain had rendered the soil near impassable, her eyes caught a peculiar sight: a lone carriage, its wheels mired in thick mud, swaying perilously. The driver's whip lay discarded at his feet, and the horses pawed the earth in panic, their flanks slick with rain and exertion. Eleanor's heart leapt, not from fear for herself, but from the sudden awareness that someone, a stranger, was trapped and in need of aid. There was an unspoken appeal in the figure standing beside the carriage, a man of such commanding presence that even the storm seemed to bow around him. His coat, dark and well-fitted, was streaked with mud. His gloves, once pristine, bore the soil of misfortune. In his stance there was both dignity and frustration, an undeniable authority tempered by vulnerability. Eleanor's instincts, honed by years of careful observation in social halls and manor parlors, recognized in him a man accustomed to command yet caught unprepared by circumstance. With a resolve born of both courage and curiosity, Eleanor urged her mare closer, her voice cutting through the wind. "Sir, may I assist you?" she called, her tone formal but carrying an undercurrent of gentle insistence. The man turned, and the storm-lit sky revealed his face, sharp features softened by a rare openness, eyes a stormy gray that mirrored the clouds above, yet flickering with intelligence and restrained amusement. He regarded her for a heartbeat, measuring, assessing, before inclining his head with a slight bow that carried both acknowledgment and subtle deference. "You are remarkably intrepid, madam," he replied, his voice smooth and resonant, tinged with a faint accent that marked him among the county's higher circles. "I fear the mud has claimed my carriage, and I lack sufficient assistance to free it." Eleanor's lips curved in the briefest smile, the thrill of intrusion mingling with compassion. "Then allow me," she said. "I am not inexperienced with horses, and I possess no fear of mud." She dismounted with nimble grace, the waterlogged earth sucking at her boots, and approached the floundering animals. The stranger watched her with a mixture of caution and curiosity, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth as she knelt to inspect the carriage wheels. Eleanor's fingers, deft and confident, traced the mechanisms, tested the mud's hold, and finally, with a measured command to the horses, orchestrated their release. The carriage groaned, shifted, and with a combination of brute strength and careful guidance, Eleanor helped the horses regain traction. The man extended a gloved hand as she rose, mud streaked across her gown, yet her posture remained dignified. "Well done, madam," he said, voice warm despite the chill. "You have remarkable courage and strength to match." For a brief moment, the world beyond the immediate danger, the sprawling fields, the tempestuous sky, the whispers of society, ceased to exist. Their eyes met, and in that gaze there was an unspoken acknowledgement. Both had glimpsed a spark that defied expectation, a connection that no polite conversation or social obligation could yet define. Eleanor felt a shiver, not of cold, but of something more elemental, an awareness that her life had shifted in an instant. Yet even as admiration flickered between them, reality intruded. The sound of hooves approaching, the faint echo of distant voices from the manor, reminded Eleanor that the world was not suspended for chance encounters. She curtsied slightly, maintaining her composure despite the mud-streaked gown, and met his eyes once more. "I trust your carriage is now sufficiently freed, sir?" He inclined his head, a subtle gesture of respect mingled with amusement. "Indeed, madam, thanks to your intervention. I am indebted to you beyond simple courtesy." There was weight in his words, an understated significance that suggested he recognized her act as more than mere kindness. Eleanor, accustomed to measured praise and the performative manners of society, found herself both unsettled and intrigued by the sincerity in his tone. "Then it is well," she replied lightly, though her pulse betrayed her composed exterior. "I am pleased to have been of assistance." The stranger offered a brief bow before climbing into his carriage, the reins firm in his hands as he prepared to navigate the muddy expanse. Yet before he could depart, Eleanor spoke once more, compelled by a curiosity she could scarcely explain. "Pray, may I inquire your name, sir?" The man's gaze softened, and he paused as though weighing the revelation. "Lord Henry Ashcombe," he said finally with measured dignity, "though I trust that a name need not define one's actions." His words hung in the air, carrying the subtle gravity of lineage, influence, and concealed fortunes. A lineage Eleanor did not yet comprehend, yet one that would soon intertwine inexorably with her own. As the carriage finally pulled free, leaving behind rutted tracks in the mud, Eleanor mounted her mare once more. The storm had intensified, raindrops slicing across her cheeks, yet she felt no desire to retreat. Instead, a thrill coursed through her, equal parts fear and exhilaration, as she contemplated the man she had aided and the invisible threads that now bound them. Her thoughts, though briefly consumed by the immediate danger, soon turned inward. Who was this stranger truly? What secrets lay hidden behind his composed countenance? And most troubling, why did the mere act of helping him stir such a curious heat in her chest? The wind carried her cloak behind her as she rode, her mind awhirl with anticipation and uncertainty. Eleanor knew the path she had chosen, one of fleeting rebellion against expectation, but the consequences of her actions and the presence of Lord Henry Ashcombe in her life would ripple far beyond the muddy fields of that stormy afternoon. The encounter, seemingly simple in its immediate purpose, had already begun to reshape the contours of her existence, threatening to challenge her loyalties, awaken dormant desires, and draw her into a labyrinth of intrigue that neither fortune nor social convention could predict. As Eleanor turned her mare toward the distant silhouette of the Whitmore manor, the storm behind her seemed to echo the tumult in her heart. She had acted on impulse, guided by courage and compassion, yet the repercussions of that single daring choice had only begun to reveal themselves. Somewhere in the rolling fields, amidst the mud and rain, the eyes of a stranger lingered in memory, and with them, the subtle promise of a future fraught with danger, longing, and the tender, consuming heat of a connection that could neither be named nor denied. The manor came into view, dark against the storm clouds, and Eleanor's pulse slowed to a measured pace, her thoughts still entangled with the man she had aided. She dismounted with care, her mind alive with questions, and felt the heavy weight of expectation settle once more upon her shoulders. Yet beneath that weight, a new ember had been kindled, a spark of possibility, of rebellion, of love yet unnamed. It was a beginning, though neither she nor the stranger could yet foresee its full consequence. And so, with the storm raging behind her and the manor looming ahead, Lady Eleanor Whitmore took her first deliberate step toward a future she had not dared imagine, unaware that the man she had helped through the mud held within him the key to both her past and the joy that awaited her beyond the constraints of duty. The morning after the storm broke over the Whitmore estate in gentle drizzle, the grounds were a mosaic of puddles and mud-slicked pathways, the scent of damp earth mingling with the faint fragrance of early blooms struggling beneath the heavy rainfall. Lady Eleanor Whitmore, still haunted by the memory of the previous day's encounter, moved with a measured grace through the drawing-room, her mind entangled with thoughts of Lord Henry Ashcombe. Her usual composure, honed over years of social observation and careful restraint, felt brittle against the persistence of her curiosity. Every glance from her governess, every remark from her mother, seemed to carry the weight of expectation, yet her thoughts drifted invariably to the stranger whose presence had unsettled her in a manner she neither anticipated nor understood. News travels swiftly in the small but tightly knit circles of the county gentry, and by mid-morning, murmurs of a young lady's audacious ride through the rain had begun to ripple through the social grapevine. Eleanor had acted in solitude, yet the act of aiding a gentleman, whose identity remained partially obscured by mud and rain, was now being embroidered with conjecture. In the parlors and corridors of neighboring estates, whispers speculated upon the possible connections between a Whitmore daughter and an unknown visitor of commanding demeanor. Eleanor, while outwardly polite and composed, felt the sting of imagined scrutiny. The notion that her impulsive courage could be interpreted as impropriety weighed upon her, yet beneath the apprehension simmered a thrill, the knowledge that she had acted upon her own will, not dictated by society, family, or convention. Meanwhile, Lord Henry Ashcombe, returned to the warmth of Ashcombe Manor, could not dismiss the image of the young lady who had emerged from the storm with both elegance and fortitude. Her determination had impressed him, yet it was her unpretentious courage, her willingness to disregard social convention in order to act rightly, that lingered in his mind with stubborn insistence. In his private chambers, he traced the outline of her face against memory, recalling the quick, precise movements of her hands as she guided his horses to safety. The brief exchange, though restrained by courtesy and formal speech, carried a weight neither of them fully comprehended. He recognized in her a spirit both unyielding and tender, qualities often absent in the rigid, polished society of his own circle. Yet Henry, ever aware of duty and discretion, knew that acknowledgment must be measured. The boundaries of propriety in 1820s England were as binding as the finest chainmail. Days passed, and Eleanor's duties resumed with the usual rigor. Lessons in literature, piano practice, and the navigation of polite conversation with visiting acquaintances. Still, her mind strayed to the mud-slicked field, to the gentleman whose voice and presence had lingered in the recesses of her memory. The household, perceptive to the subtle shifts in her demeanor, observed her occasional absences and distracted air with quiet concern. It was during an afternoon visit from a distant cousin that the matter of propriety became unavoidable. Mrs. Cavendish, a matron of stern bearing and unyielding scrutiny, remarked with a thinly veiled tone, "I trust, my dear, that your excursions do not lead to indiscretions with strangers of questionable standing?" Eleanor's lips curved faintly, her eyes steady, yet a faint flush betrayed the stirrings of amusement and indignation. "Madam," she replied with measured politeness, "I assure you my excursions are dictated by prudence if not by necessity." The subtle firmness in her tone suggested both intelligence and defiance, qualities that did not escape the elder woman's sharp gaze. A week later, Eleanor's path crossed again with Henry's, though by circumstance rather than design. The estate's weekly market, a hub of exchange and social observation, found the two in close proximity amid merchants, shoppers, and fellow gentry. Eleanor's awareness of the world around her had always been keen, but now she moved with a heightened consciousness, noting not only the mundane exchanges of produce and wares but the shadow of intrigue and recognition in every glance. Henry, similarly attuned, approached under the guise of casual inquiry, yet his measured steps and composed manner betrayed a conscious effort to engage without overstepping the bounds of propriety. Their initial greeting, brief and formally courteous, carried beneath its surface a current of unspoken acknowledgment, the memory of shared struggle in the mud, the subtle resonance of mutual admiration. To navigate the rigid expectations of society while nurturing an incipient bond required delicate maneuvers. Henry, aware of Eleanor's family's precarious situation, employed gestures both subtle and thoughtful. A reserved bow in the marketplace, a whispered inquiry regarding her health during the morning mist, small attentions that communicated interest without breaching decorum. Eleanor, in turn, responded with refined politeness, yet her eyes and slight inflections of tone revealed an engagement beyond ordinary civility. Each encounter, however constrained, became a private dialogue, a conversation conducted in glances, gestures, and the silences between words. These moments were not merely trivial amusements. They were acts of courage, for both understood that to acknowledge attraction publicly could invite censure or worse, social ostracism. It was during one such encounter, in the sheltered corner of a flowered courtyard, that Henry extended a token of thoughtful recognition. From beneath the folds of his coat, he produced a pressed violet, carefully preserved and bound with a ribbon of delicate silk. "For you, Lady Eleanor," he said, voice low yet clear, "that it may remind you, even amidst society's scrutiny, that the smallest acts of kindness endure." Eleanor accepted the gift with a mixture of surprise and controlled delight. The simplicity of the gesture, its quiet poetry, contrasted sharply with the elaborate gestures typical of courtly pursuit, and it spoke directly to her heart. She pressed the flower to her chest, acknowledging its significance without breaching the subtle line of propriety that both observed so carefully. Despite these tender moments, the shadow of societal expectation loomed. Letters arrived with news of her father's financial concerns, rumors of unpaid debts, and the tacit pressures to secure an advantageous match. Eleanor's courage, though admirable, did not insulate her from reality. Each act of personal agency was weighed against the rigid scales of reputation and duty. Yet it was precisely this tension, the collision of personal longing with societal obligation, that lent depth to her character and resilience to her spirit. She navigated the drawing rooms and garden paths with grace, yet her thoughts remained tethered to the stranger who had stirred both admiration and curiosity, whose presence challenged her perception of possibility within the constrained framework of her world. The week drew to a close with an evening walk along the estate's boundary, where puddles reflected the silvered moonlight, and the air carried the lingering scent of rain and wet foliage. Eleanor paused, contemplating the horizon where the distant line of trees blurred into the foggy distance. She felt the pulse of anticipation in her veins, a quiet acknowledgement that the events of the past days, chance encounter, whispered glances, subtle tokens, had begun to shape the contours of a story far beyond her immediate understanding. The wind stirred her cloak, and for a fleeting moment she imagined the possibilities, both daring and perilous, that lay ahead. She did not yet know the full measure of Henry's connection to her family's estate, nor the secrets that might unravel between them, but she understood with unwavering certainty that the world she had once navigated with careful caution was now inextricably altered. As she returned toward the manor, Eleanor's steps were measured, yet her heart carried a quiet fire. The simple acts of courage she had performed, the brief yet resonant encounters with Lord Henry Ashcombe, and the subtle tokens exchanged had already begun to weave a tapestry of intrigue, emotion, and forbidden possibility. Though outwardly the world remained unchanged, rooms still adorned with velvet draperies, chandeliers casting golden light across polished floors, and the ever-watchful eyes of society present in every gesture, the interior landscape of her life had shifted irrevocably. The delicate balance of propriety, desire, and impending revelation promised both danger and delight, and Eleanor, ever-spirited, prepared herself to navigate the days to come with both intelligence and heart. And so, as the last traces of twilight faded into the velvet darkness of evening, Eleanor Whitmore paused at the threshold of the drawing-room window, gazing at the moonlit fields that stretched toward an uncertain horizon. Somewhere beyond those rolling pastures, beyond the reach of immediate concern and whispered gossip, lay a world in which courage, compassion, and desire could converge, and in which the man she had aided, and whose presence now lingered with quiet insistence in her thoughts, might reveal both the secrets of her past and the promise of a future unbound by mere obligation. The storm had receded, yet its echo remained, a promise that the tide of circumstance, chance, and hidden longing would continue to shape her path in ways both perilous and exquisite. The evening descended upon Whitmore Manor with a quiet elegance, draping the estate in muted gold and shadowed corners where the flicker of candlelight barely held the darkness at bay. Lady Eleanor Whitmore lingered in the library, the musty scent of leather-bound volumes mingling with the faint perfume of lilacs pressed into a vase at the window-sill. She had long sought refuge in these pages, where the voices of distant authors whispered of virtue, courage, and forbidden longing, yet tonight her mind refused the comfort of fiction. Every narrative, every tale of genteel restraint and tender defiance, paled in comparison to the reality of her own entanglement, an entanglement as sudden as the storm that had introduced Lord Henry Ashcombe into her life and as consuming as the secret ache of curiosity and admiration that now thrummed in her chest. A gentle knock at the library door startled her, and before she could summon a response, the door opened with the quiet grace of someone well acquainted with both the house and the boundaries of decorum. Henry stood there, dark coat dampened from the evening mist, eyes steady and intent, the faintest crease of concern marring his otherwise composed visage. "May I intrude, Lady Eleanor?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of restraint and a subtle invitation, one she could neither decline nor fully comprehend. She inclined her head in measured acknowledgement, gesturing toward the armchair by the fire. "Sir, you are welcome," she said, though her heart betrayed the formality of her words with a fluttering that resonated through her entire being. He entered with deliberate care, removing gloves and hat with the precision of a man trained in propriety, yet each movement seemed to speak to her with unspoken meaning. Once seated, he regarded her for a heartbeat, as if measuring the distance between them not in mere steps but in the quiet spaces of hesitation, hope, and unspoken emotion. "I trust you have fared well since our encounter?" he inquired, voice even, yet carrying a resonance that suggested he did not merely ask out of politeness. Eleanor's fingers toyed with the edge of a page, though she had not read its contents in some time. "I have fared as one might expect, sir," she replied, though the words were inadequate to convey the tumult of thought and feeling within her. "And you?" A subtle smile flickered across her lips, betraying both curiosity and a measure of fondness she scarcely permitted herself to acknowledge. Henry inclined his head, gaze steady. "I have considered our meeting in the field," he said, "and found that your courage and judgment are qualities far rarer than the world affords notice." The compliment, though delivered with impeccable decorum, struck Eleanor with the force of a quiet revelation. She shifted slightly, conscious of the heat rising to her cheeks, and yet unable to resist the magnetic pull of his words. "It is scarcely bravery, sir," she said softly, "to assist a gentleman whose plight is obvious to any observer. Perhaps it is merely instinct." Her voice held a faint tremor, betraying both humility and a heart aware of its own dangerous stirrings. Henry's gaze softened, as if recognizing in her admission a shared understanding, a common thread of sincerity amidst a society of polished facades. The conversation unfolded with careful deliberation, a dance of words and silences that revealed as much in what remained unspoken as in the statements themselves. Henry spoke of fleeting travels, obligations of estate, and the burdens of inheritance, all carefully phrased to obscure the depth of his connection to her family's circumstances. Eleanor, in turn, revealed portions of her daily life, careful not to breach propriety yet offering glimpses of the independence and spirited determination that had first captured his attention. In the quiet intimacy of the library, the world beyond the manor's walls, the gossip, the expectations, the judgment of society, seemed to dissolve, leaving only the palpable tension of two souls negotiating the boundaries of decorum and desire. At length, Henry reached into the pocket of his coat, producing a folded letter sealed with wax, its emblem discreet yet unmistakable to those versed in the symbols of aristocratic lineage. He extended it toward her, though not in the manner of a formal presentation. Rather, it was offered with the subtle gravity of trust, the acknowledgement that its contents were meant for her alone. "This letter," he said, voice low, "contains truths which you have the right to know, though the full measure of their impact must be discerned with caution." Eleanor accepted it with trembling hands, breaking the seal with delicate care. The words within revealed fragments of her father's dealings, obligations owed to the crown, and the intricate connection between Henry's own estate and the Whitmore lands, a revelation that cast both the past and future in new and complicated light. She read in silence, absorbing the weight of revelation, while Henry observed with a mixture of patience and concern, knowing that the emotional resonance of truth required time to settle. When she finally raised her eyes, the warmth of the fire illuminated her expression, a blend of astonishment, apprehension, and a dawning comprehension of the stakes now entwined with her life. "I did not realize," she said softly, "how entangled our families have been, nor how much this connection might demand of us." Her voice, though controlled, trembled slightly with the weight of emotion and the unspoken acknowledgement of attraction and trust. Henry inclined his head, the faintest shadow of relief passing over his features. "Nor did I anticipate," he replied quietly, "the degree to which your courage and discernment would reveal what is necessary for us to face together. There is no simple path, Lady Eleanor, yet I find that honesty, though perilous, may guide us with greater certainty than discretion alone." His words, imbued with solemnity and subtle passion, struck at the core of her conscience and heart alike. For a time, they sat in companionable silence, the crackling of the fire marking the slow passage of minutes, each aware of the weight of revelation and the delicate bloom of trust forming between them. Eleanor's mind traced the contours of possibility and danger, weighing the obligations of her family against the potential of her own desires. Henry, similarly contemplative, measured the propriety of restraint against the undeniable connection he felt, a connection strengthened by shared courage and the intimacy of mutual understanding. Each glance, each subtle inflection of tone, became a dialogue beyond mere words, a conversation of hearts navigating a landscape defined by duty, longing, and the fragile hope of connection. The evening waned, and with it the warmth of the fire began to fade, leaving the library bathed in the cool, muted glow of the lanterns. Eleanor folded the letter carefully, aware that its contents were not to be spoken of lightly, yet her eyes lingered on Henry with a quiet intensity. "I am grateful," she said finally, "for your trust, and for your presence, which seems to temper the uncertainties that have long troubled my thoughts." Henry's gaze softened, his lips curving in a subtle acknowledgement of shared sentiment. "It is I who am indebted, Lady Eleanor," he said, "for revealing to me that courage, grace, and discretion may coexist in ways more profound than I had dared to imagine." The exchange, though restrained, resonated with unspoken meaning, establishing a bond both delicate and enduring. As the manor settled into the gentle hush of night, Eleanor rose, smoothing the folds of her gown with careful fingers. She felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation, knowing that the revelations of the evening had altered the landscape of her life irrevocably. Henry rose as well, pausing at the doorway, and for a heartbeat their eyes met, silent acknowledgment passing between them of the shared understanding and tentative hope that now united them. The world beyond the walls remained governed by expectation, yet within the quiet intimacy of the library, two hearts had discovered a fragile yet undeniable alignment. When he departed, Eleanor remained standing by the window, gazing into the moonlit courtyard where shadows of hedges and statues played beneath the silvered light. She held the letter close, feeling the weight of history, obligation, and possibility pressing gently against her chest. The revelation of past entanglements, the recognition of courage in unexpected form, and the subtle spark of mutual admiration had woven a tapestry of tension, longing, and quiet hope. She knew that the days to come would test both resolve and heart, yet she also understood with unshakable clarity that the path she now traversed, though fraught with uncertainty, held the potential for profound discovery, both of self and of that rarest of intimacies, a connection forged in courage, trust, and the tender acknowledgement of unspoken desire. The night deepened, and Eleanor extinguished the lamps, leaving only the moonlight to trace the contours of the library shelves. She lingered in thought, recalling the storm, the mud, the resolute hands that had guided the horses, and the eyes that had met hers with equal mixture of admiration and restraint. In the quiet that followed, she understood that the course of her life had been irrevocably altered, that the stranger of the storm, Lord Henry Ashcombe, was no mere accident of circumstance but the catalyst for change, revelation, and a connection that promised both challenge and extraordinary reward. And with that understanding, Eleanor Whitmore allowed herself a single measured breath, the faintest smile gracing her lips as anticipation and uncertainty intertwined, preparing her for the trials, confessions, and tender declarations that lay just beyond the horizon. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Whitmore Manor, casting soft, golden streaks across the polished floors and illuminating the delicate dust motes that danced in quiet celebration of the day's arrival. Lady Eleanor Whitmore moved with a poised grace through the corridors, her thoughts restless yet deliberate. The events of recent days, her encounter with Lord Henry Ashcombe in the storm, the whispered exchanges in the garden and marketplace, and the revelations contained within the carefully folded letter, had forged a path she could no longer ignore. Each step toward the drawing room, where Henry had requested to meet her, felt weighted with anticipation, as if the very air knew that the culmination of unspoken truths and tender longing was imminent. Henry awaited her with calm composure, though the subtle tenseness of his posture betrayed the significance of the moment. He stood near the window, sunlight catching the edges of his coat, the shadows of the morning playing across his features, lending an almost ethereal quality to his presence. When Eleanor entered, the air seemed to shift, charged with the quiet electricity of recognition, shared history, and unspoken possibility. He inclined his head, a gesture both respectful and intimate, acknowledging her arrival while leaving space for the delicate balance of propriety that governed their interactions. "Lady Eleanor," he began, voice steady yet resonant, "I have requested this meeting to speak plainly, for the time has come to set aside circumspection and face that which lies between us with clarity." Eleanor, though accustomed to measured discourse, felt a flutter of apprehension and hope mingle within her chest. She nodded, settling into a chair with composure, hands folded delicately in her lap. "I am prepared to listen, sir," she replied, her voice calm, though it carried an undercurrent of anticipation. Henry's gaze met hers, unwavering, conveying both sincerity and the quiet power of restraint. "From the moment you aided me in the field, Lady Eleanor, I have been compelled to reassess not only the circumstances of our families but also the course of my own heart. Your courage, fortitude, and grace have revealed qualities I did not anticipate, qualities I cannot disregard. It is no longer sufficient to speak in measured civility, for the matter of truth demands confession." The weight of his words settled upon Eleanor like the gentle pressure of autumn fog over the moors, subtle, enveloping, yet impossible to ignore. She felt a tremor of emotion, a delicate acknowledgement that the same sentiments she had harbored in quiet reflection were now mirrored in his declaration. "And what, sir," she asked softly, "is the nature of this confession?" Her voice was composed, yet the faintest tremor betrayed the intensity of her anticipation. Henry drew a measured breath, stepping closer, yet careful to respect the boundaries of propriety. "It is this, that my regard for you, Lady Eleanor, transcends the customary civility owed by society and the constraints imposed by duty. I find myself compelled to declare, without equivocation, that I care for you with a depth I cannot feign, and that I desire, if you are willing, a union not of convenience, but of hearts fully aware of their affection and intent." Eleanor's pulse quickened, a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension coursing through her veins. The enormity of his words, delivered with dignity and sincerity, resonated with the quiet courage she herself had exercised. She had long feared the suffocating expectations of society, the dictates of matrimony forged by circumstance rather than choice, yet here in the sunlight-drenched library, a possibility emerged, one in which desire, duty, and mutual respect could converge. "Lord Henry," she began, her voice steady yet softened by emotion, "I confess that your words honor me beyond expectation. I too have felt the stirrings of admiration and, more, since the day you were trapped in the mud and I dared to assist you." Her admission, though careful and measured, carried the undeniable weight of truth, a truth that transformed the contours of their relationship from cautious curiosity into intentional vulnerability. Henry's eyes brightened, though tempered by the gentleness of his manner. "Then, Lady Eleanor, may I hope that your courage in accepting the truth of your own heart extends to accepting mine?" he asked, voice tender yet firm. She rose, closing the distance between them with steps that carried both poise and an undeniable eagerness, and extended her hand, a silent gesture of trust and affirmation. "You may, Lord Henry," she replied, voice imbued with both certainty and warmth, "for it seems that in revealing our hearts, we discover the strength to navigate the storms of both circumstance and expectation." The acknowledgement of mutual regard, tender yet resolute, marked the beginning of a transformation not only in their relationship but in the broader fabric of their lives. Letters previously folded and concealed were now recognized as instruments of understanding, revealing obligations, entanglements, and the intricate interplay of family legacy. Together, they traced the lines of past misunderstandings and unfulfilled duties, resolving to approach the responsibilities that had once seemed insurmountable with shared determination. Eleanor's father, informed discreetly of Henry's character and integrity, found solace in the knowledge that his daughter's future was not only secured but enriched by the union of affection, intellect, and mutual respect. The weight of societal expectation, though present, no longer loomed as a barrier to connection. Instead, it became a stage upon which courage and discretion could perform harmoniously. In the days that followed, the courtship unfolded with deliberate elegance. Walks along the Duke-kissed lawns allowed for conversation unhurried by the pressures of public observation, while evenings spent in the Manor's drawing-room permitted the subtle exchange of glances, gestures, and the occasional whispered observation that deepened intimacy without breaching propriety. Tokens of affection, modest yet meaningful, were exchanged. A pressed violet here, a shared cup of tea there, each act reinforcing trust, admiration, and the fragile excitement of love unfolding within carefully observed boundaries. Their interactions, though restrained, carried an unmistakable vitality, a rhythm composed of laughter, shared reflection, and the recognition of an extraordinary connection forged amid circumstance, courage, and empathy. A pivotal moment arrived when Henry, having secured assurances regarding familial obligations and the management of estates, extended an invitation for Eleanor to visit Ashcombe Manor. The invitation, though couched in the language of propriety, carried the implicit promise of intimacy, exploration of shared values, and the deepening of emotional connection. Eleanor, heart alight with anticipation yet tempered by caution, accepted. The journey across the countryside, accompanied by a servant and her faithful mare, allowed her reflection on the path she had traversed, from the storm-laden fields of their first encounter to the quiet confession that had laid their hearts bare. Each mile carried both exhilaration and apprehension, for she understood that the forthcoming encounter would demand the full measure of courage, composure, and authenticity that she had cultivated in the preceding weeks. Upon arrival, Ashcombe Manor revealed itself as both imposing and welcoming, a structure of stately elegance softened by gardens, fountains, and the subtle imprint of human care. Henry guided her through the halls with quiet attentiveness, introducing her to those whose presence would shape her experience and subtly preparing her for the acknowledgement of responsibilities entwined with fortune, inheritance, and social standing. Yet amidst the grandeur, Eleanor found moments of unanticipated intimacy, shared laughter in a sunlit library, whispered observations in a hidden garden alcove, and the gentle reassurance of presence during fleeting moments of uncertainty. Each encounter, each gesture, served to fortify the bond between them, transforming affection into love grounded in understanding, courage, and mutual respect. At length, beneath the twilight glow of the manor gardens, Henry took Eleanor's hand in both of his own. "Eleanor," he said softly, voice carrying the weight of certainty and tenderness, "we have navigated storms, both of weather and circumstance. We have revealed truths, confronted obligations, and discovered in each other the courage that sustains the heart. Will you join me not merely as a companion, but as a partner in both life and legacy?" Eleanor, heart swelling with the culmination of longing, admiration and resolve, inclined her head, eyes shimmering with both tears and delight. "I will, Henry," she whispered, voice steady with conviction. "With all my heart I will." The union, though formally pending the blessings of society and family, was sealed in that moment by acknowledgement, trust, and the irrevocable choice to embrace love above fear. The storm had passed, leaving behind not only the memory of turmoil but the quiet revelation that courage, integrity, and the willingness to act upon one's heart could shape destiny with elegance and grace. As they stood hand in hand, the manor bathed in twilight's soft glow, Eleanor Whitmore and Henry Ashcombe found within each other both solace and exhilaration, the promise of shared life, and the extraordinary beauty of a love born amid adversity and nurtured with care. And so, with hearts aligned and futures intertwined, the story of their meeting, their courage, and their unspoken devotion reached a tender resolution, not with grandiose spectacle, but with the quiet certainty of two souls recognizing, embracing, and affirming the extraordinary potential of love in its most delicate and enduring form.